All right, so we're back. Application of meditation, where we discuss the structure of the practices that we've done. What are your experiences? Why are they structured in this way? And what is the purpose and modifications of the techniques? Like, why are we doing what we're doing, etc. All right, so we'll do a little bit of chanting first, and then we'll discuss. Shri Krishna Vagishayati Shvadabhyam Samprapta Chakran Karna Bhashya Sadram Shri Nuit Narengendra Yatau Samarpitasvam Shri Krishna Maryam Guru Varyamide Virodhe Kartike Mase Shatatara Akritodayam Yoga Charyam Krishna Maryam Guru Varyamaham Bhaji Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Okay, so what we're working on this month is two things. So, in terms of the preparatory techniques, in terms of the asana and pranayama, in this case we don't have any pranayama, but in terms of asana and etc., it's so important to remember that our fundamental anatomies are Indian. Our epistemology is coming from India, not from Western allopathic medical science, okay? So it's very tempting to look at postures and to think in terms of what we get taught in Western anatomy about tendons and ligaments and muscles and bones, etc., and alignment and whatnot. There is no mention of alignment anywhere, to my knowledge. Maybe there is, but to my knowledge, there is no mention of physical bone muscle alignments. And it's not that India did not understand these anatomical parts. They had a very deep understanding of it. Ayurveda, for example, Ayurveda will say there are, I think 6, but maybe 7 layers of skin. Tvak, 7 different layers of skin. This is way beyond what Western allopathic model will talk about in terms of layers of skin. So it's not that India didn't know these things. It's that the model, something else is happening in the practice, and that is what is emphasized. So I really want to talk a little bit about the different, prana and apana, and the inhale and exhale, and how that shows up in postures. Specifically, the development of postures over time should be towards stay. So you start with dynamic movements. Those are big macro movements. Over time, you should move into medium range movements. And then, I don't know, some people say short range movements and then micro movements. I don't see the difference between the last two, but there are technically 4 categories. But anyway, the point is that everything that happens in your spine in the macro movements, the big movements, should be happening in the mid-range and in the micro movements. So part of the skill in asana is learning how to do that. And again, as we've said many times in here, the focus of asana is the spine. Shoulder girdle, pelvis, hip, all those things are important. And I'm not saying they're not, but somehow in Western yoga, so much has gone in the direction of the hip and the shoulder. No, the main game is the spine. And the spine is moved by breathing. And your movements should come out of the breathing. And of course, that's all tied together with breathing changes the state of your system. And as the state of your system changes, then the operation of your mind and your behavior and your emotions also change, etc. So to think about, meditation as something that requires preparation is very important. You should not just sit on your mat, sit on your cushion, because then you're going to spend time using the mind to change the quality of the system so that the mind can focus. This is inefficient. It can be done, lots of meditation traditions do it, but it is way more efficient to spend a few minutes doing some breathing and some movement that changes the state of the system. Then the mind becomes directable. Then when you sit on the cushion, the quality and the depth of the meditation are much more quickly accessible. What we were given from Mr. Deshikachar is very sophisticated, not only in like philosophical interpretation, or not only in the understanding of what the texts say, etc., but it's also very neatly, tightly connected to ways of practicing, so that like actually how you are in practice is an expression of the ideas and things that are being put forth in the text. It's really stunning what has been passed down. So, it also is not something that can just be picked up and practiced like that. It takes a while. If you remember in the first chapter of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra number 17, Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita Rupa, Anugamat, Samprajñataha. Patanjali describes that a state of yoga is a kind of pattern that takes some while to develop. Just like any pattern, you start off gross, not being able to do it, not understanding it, not connected to it, but you learn some things. And as you start off with that, slowly you see things that are more subtle. And as you see things that are more subtle, they become obvious. And as those things are obvious, then there's a further exploration of what is more subtle than that. And it goes on, etc., slowly developing to the point where asmita rupa means it becomes your form. In other words, like second nature. Like there's an acquisition, an acquiring of the capacity. So, there are so many, and then you can say that all techniques are arranged on continuums. You start off with very gross, and it gets less gross, more subtle, very subtle, etc. So every technique fits onto some continuum somewhere and is related to a bunch of other techniques. So there's no such thing as a correct or incorrect technique. There's only correct and incorrect application of the technique, because everything has purpose. It's just, is the purpose being utilized in that person? And that is related to their own capacity and to what is the next step that needs to happen in their practice. So one of the things that you see all the time with people is that when they exhale, the chest collapses. And you see this in uttānāsana. People do uttānāsana like a swan dive. No, no, no. Arms stay here all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. The action is in the abdomen. At the very end, the chest collapses. People don't do that. They do chest like this. No, it should be like this all the way down. The action is here. This is a paschimottanā posture. The action is in the abdomen. It's in the apana region. And then at the end, there's the rolling of the top. Same thing happens on the way out. People come out of it like this. This is completely ignoring the energetic anatomy. Inhale is prana focused. What happens? Bring the arms first. Bring the arms first. Head comes first. Then we come up out of it like this. So like this is so important to the energetics of this practice. And what are we using asana for? The body is the most gross tool we have. It's the easiest to be attentive to. Breath is more subtle. It's harder. It's the next step harder. More subtle than that is mind. More subtle than that, behavior. More subtle than that, emotions, right? So there's this kind of hierarchy. Body is the easiest to pay attention to. It's the easiest to start to find all these things. But as you start to find them, then there's a whole bunch of range of where you can go and what you cannot do. And at the far end of this, as you exhale, chest should remain open. In order for chest to remain open, the arms should be in the place where the chest is most open. Lots of people are married to their ears. They raise their arms up like this. Their arms are near their ears, but you see what happens? There's like a tightening here and they get blocked. The chest is blocked. How can you have prana if your chest is blocked? If you come a little wider, and it will be different for different people. Tamra can have her arms alongside of her ears and her chest can be completely open, etc. But I cannot. So it will be different for different people. The point is that you should be positioning the arms in the place where the chest is open and keeping them there all the way down. Don't allow yourself to come like this. That collapsing of the chest is leaking prana. Okay. Same thing on the way out. What people do on the way out is that the breath immediately leaks into the abdomen. The body is so intelligent. It will follow the path of least resistance. Don't let that happen. Keep your abdomen drawn in as you inhale. Let it come, make it come into the chest. Move the arms first. Move the head first. Now we have an opening here, etc. Okay, so Whitney's comments are so interesting. There is the physical experience of that. But underlying that and underpinning that is a more subtle experience of prana. And you have body and you have breath, and the operation of the body and the operation of the breathing is related, is dependent upon prana. So you can influence the flow of your prana through your body and through your breathing by changing them. Okay. But ideally, what should happen in the practice of asana is actually that the body is following the prana, that there is a kind of intention set, prana moves, breath flows, body is the expression of that. So finding that is not a 2-week process. Finding that is not a 2-week process. But what we should, the reason why it's so important to know technique is not so that you can do perfect technique. It's so that you can be aware of the purpose, and so that actually the purposes can be accomplished even if the specific technique is not possible in your body. You know, I think Whitney's comments they're so aligned to this. There's a operation of your vehicle that's required. Okay, I started today's practices very solid. Don't let your inhale leak into your abdomen. Don't let your exhale leak into a collapsed chest, etc. Right? Okay, but straight out of the box is not, that may not be very possible. You may have to do some breathing first and come around, etc. Because that everybody's going to have to sort of apply it in yourself, and there's not like a if you do it like this, then boom, you won the lottery and all the the jackpot is all lined up and liberation is there. It's not like, oh, I did the technique right, and then it's like there's some things to discover within your system and align with those things, and that is part of the bigger picture of yoga, which is that, spirit, if you prefer God, is operating within your system and within you and communicating with you about where to go and what to do. And the whole point of the yoga practice as a big thing is to align with that. This is Dharma. This is, every person on the planet is here for reason, for purposes, reasons. And the whole dichotomy is between, am I driving or am I listening and following? So practice is an opportunity for us to actually listen, even though it looks like it's an opportunity for us to drive. So the whole piece here is, how do you operate the system in a way that encourages the discovery of and the alignment with these things that are in you. Again, all techniques are just on a continuum. And so the question is, what is your capacity, or what is it that's useful for your system? And then that technique should be based on that, not that one technique is right and the other is wrong, or vice versa. So what we have been exploring in the last week, since the beginning of the year, is a methodology for helping someone find the experiential, we can even say emotional, or the feeling basis for particular meditation objects. Why this is important is because in the steps of development, from a yoga perspective, healing is prerequisite for liberation. You can't go straight to liberation. You have to actually do your work first. And your work involves your previous experiences, at the very least from this lifetime. So that is going to be on the emotional and personality levels, Vijnanamaya and Anandamaya. And a lot of that stuff is precognitive. Or another way of saying it is beyond the grasp of our intellect.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
beyond the grasp of the intellect is more accurate because lots of it happens when we have intellect. We're just not, it just for whatever reason, we're not able to wrap our head around it, articulate it. And the other mistake that people make is that simply by understanding it, that is not going to heal it, because the understanding is on the manomaya, it's on the level of the intellect, but the actual wound is on the vijnanamaya or the anandamaya. So you can't use the intellect to heal the emotion. You have to actually heal on the emotional level. So lots of people that access is blocked. Like we've learned that if I go to my emotions, I suffer. So I build all kinds of behavioral mental patterning that prevents me from accessing that. So this, from starting from the beginning of the year, we have been working on a way of allowing the person to find the feelings first and then come in to an object,
Mhm.
which is, I won't say we use it particularly often. Most of the time we start with the object because the object, people already have experiences, they already have feeling sets. With a properly chosen object, then all of these emotional level things can happen. And it's a pattern on all of these different levels. It's a physical pattern about posture, it's a breathing pattern around the operation and behavior of your breathing, it's a pattern of how your attention works. But it's also more than that. It's a pattern of your perception, your communication. These are Vijnanamaya level things. It's a pattern of your feeling sets, Anandamaya levels, right? So one of the brilliance of this system is that it, how to say this? You can use one level to influence another. This is why, when people do the physical yoga, actually their emotions change, right? So they're doing something on a physical level and the anandamaya, the emotional level shifts. Same thing, this is why for a couple thousand years, pranayama is the required prerequisite for meditation, because you change the way you breathe and it influences the operation of your mind, right? So you can use one level to influence the behavior and operation of the other level. But it is also limited. It's an influence. You can't do the emotional work with the intellect. You cannot do the behavioral work with the breath. The breathing can open the door, can influence, etc., the behavioral work, but you have to actually do the behavioral work on the behavioral level. So what these objects do, and remember, Patanjali is not committed to objects. The word Patanjali uses is place. It's the place where you put your attention, desha. So anywhere that you put your attention is an object, right? It's not that, oh, we have to come up with an object. So objects can be concepts, objects can be feelings, sensations, they can be visualized things, etc. So there's a comment here. I thought the levels influenced each other. They do. They do. Changing one level changes all the other levels. That's right. That is true. That's what I am saying that. And you cannot do all the work of a particular level on another level. You have to actually do that work on that level. So this is why, to some degree, talk therapy is limited, because when you understand your issues, the understanding is on the manomaya level, whereas the issues are on the vijnana maya and the anandamaya. They're, understanding is in the intellect, is in the mind, and yet the behavior and the emotions are where the wounds are. So part of what happens in talk therapy is the relationship, the experience of the relationship with the therapist. That experience is on Anandamaya and Vijnanamaya level. That experience is on the behavioral and emotional levels. That is very healing. Okay. So what we're doing with the place where you put your attention is it generates an experience. And the experience itself is on Vijnanamaya and Anandamaya levels. So we have the over the past couple months, what we've been trying to do is to develop the feeling sets, and then let the feeling sets give us the object, the place, because there's this connection. When you put your attention in this place, those feeling sets arise. When you have those feeling sets, then that place is easy to, is readily available, right? So we come to the feeling sets. Now we're allowing the feeling sets to be seeds. Then we take the seeds and we put them in our life. And then we experience them develop and grow and bloom. Something will happen on the Vijnanamaya and the Anandamaya levels that is outside the reach of the Manomaya level. In other words, something will happen emotionally and behaviorally that is not completely capturable by the intellect through the experience of the seed being put into an area of my life and blooming. And a lot of the time, it's subtle enough that we won't even actually even perceive it happening. It will just be the capacity will be developing and something will be there. And then, it's weeks or months or years later when something happens and all of a sudden we see that, oh, wow, I have really responded differently to this, that we pick up what's there.